Welcome back. And it's a very special welcome once again to our guest, Captain Jim Fanell, United States Navy retired. Jim has been actively involved for decades in the fight to both raise awareness about and counter the threat we face as a nation from the Chinese Communist Party, formerly in the uniform of a U.S. Navy intelligence officer, director of intelligence for the Seventh Fleet, the Pacific Fleet of the United States, and also now with the Center for the Geneva Center for Security Policy. Jim, we were talking before we broke about the role that elite capture is playing in our country. One of the things that they're having to confront many in that elite is, on the one hand, they're very concerned, and I understand why, about what's going on in Ukraine at the hands of the Russians. But they seem not to be focusing as much on the role the Chinese Communist Party is playing in helping make that ongoing murderous aggression possible. Talk a little bit about this, and in particular, the sort of propaganda line that China has now pulled in behind, namely Putin's argument that this is all NATO's fault, not his.
Right, Frank. It's very clear that the Chinese Communist Party is standing shoulder to shoulder with Putin and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Um, they have tried to walk a line in the public arena to suggest that they're not taking sides and they want everybody to come to a mutual agreement. But in behind closed doors and what they're telling their people in Chinese press is that this is the reason for this invasion is the fault of the United States primarily and NATO for their expansion of the NATO environment. That's a lie. But that's what they've told 1.4 billion people. And that's what the people of China are discussing. And the Chinese Communist Party is providing and buying up Russian oil, billions of dollars of oil and gas. And they're going to be buying food. So China has not only rhetorically acclimatized their population to support Russia, they're providing them funding to keep the Russian war machine going. And they're getting a deal on it. Russia's having to sell some things cheaper. But the fact of the matter is that China is propping them up with oil, purchasing their oil. And what we don't really know is what they're supplying them in terms of technology and information. China's got its own satellites. China's got its own intelligence network. So, what are they providing to Russia to help them? And what technologies are they giving the Russians to help them murder more Ukrainians and potentially Americans?
Yeah. Well, speaking of intelligence, we know that the Russians got from the Chinese Communist Party some of our intelligence, which the Biden administration insanely saw fit to share with them about the Russian order of battle and the situation on the ground there, I guess, in Ukraine. Jim, let me turn to another aspect of what the Chinese are doing. Speaking of technology, you and your Red Storm Risen um, Google group have been incredibly helpful to me, among others, in raising awareness about something that apparently Xi personally, put his imprint on just today, namely the importance of the China digital domain dominance. Talk a little bit about that as it plays into both an ability to use such data for obviously military purposes, but also for commercial purposes, and what it would mean for the rest of us if it secures the kind of dominant position that it seeks there.
Yeah, Frank, this issue with what they're calling digital China is something that Xi has been personally involved with for 20 years, back when he was in charge of the Fujian province in eastern China around Shanghai, just in that area in eastern China. And he's been pushing this for, like I said, 20 years. And he just chaired the 25th Central Commission on Comprehensively Deepening Reform, Digital Government, tops that agenda. And so what he's pushing for is a digital government and a single digital database that would control the entire nation of China, the People's Republic of China. And they're really putting a push on this. And there's a new website called Digital China Wins the Future that's produced by Dr. Dave Dorman. And they're really digging into analyzing in Chinese sources what they're talking about. But what it means essentially is that the government, the central government in Beijing, would tie in, what's going on with COVID, what's going on with the military, what's going on with banking, what's going on with information technology, retail markets, everything into a single database, and that they would control your life much in the same way that Twitter or Facebook controls who can put things online and not put things online. And through their social credit system, they would know everything about you from every aspect of your life, and that would control what you would be able to do and not do. For instance, if you did the wrong things, if you bought too many cigarettes or drank too much, or you looked at the wrong websites, you would, in essence, be prevented, from maybe even shopping in certain stores or to be able to even leave your own home. And we're seeing that implemented in parts through this lockdown again, and now in Shanghai, like we saw in Wuhan. But this is really a push from Xi to have this centrally controlled, and that the data of 1.4 billion people multiplied times trillions of pieces of bits of information would go into this centralized database that then would be artificial intelligence and big data analytics would then instruct the government on what to do. And there would be no interpersonal interaction. There would be no subjectivity for somebody to say, hey, my mother is dying and she needs to get in to get a cancer screening, and they're telling her, sorry, you can't go in to get a cancer screening for your mother because your iPhone says that you've been exposed to somebody with the virus.
Mm.
And so this kind of
Or you have wrong thoughts.
dystopian,
Yeah.
or you have
on,
wrong
on
thoughts.
on a number of other grounds you can be and there's talk now that their cryptocurrency could be programmable so as to facilitate that kind of control, manipulation, punishment, what have you. Jim, we're almost out of time. I wanted to ask you about a big topic, and to do so very briefly, if you would. Another domain in which China has been very aggressively pursuing dominance is space. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States announced that henceforth the United States government would refrain from testing what are called direct ascent anti satellite weapons, lest they cause debris fields and mess up outer space, in the hopes that that would create a new norm and promote responsible behavior that will conduce to the peaceful use of space. As a man who understands what the Chinese are up to, their doctrine, and most especially their actual capabilities for anti satellite warfare, direct ascent and otherwise, is there any chance, in your estimation, that they will be participating in this new norm and otherwise uh, foregoing the militarization of space on which they seem bent?
The short answer is no. And what her statement and this policy position from this administration is reflective of the old engagement school, the school that we have now repudiated, history has repudiated as being ineffective and just naive. The fact that we would think that by unilaterally stopping direct ascent weapon testing or research and all of that that goes into it, which will be affected, the idea that by us not doing this would create a culture whereby the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party would say, oh, well, we want to join you, is just completely uh, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's devoid of any evidence of prior success from that kind of thinking in anything with the People's Republic of China. There's not one example.
Amen. Biological warfare being just another, their program
Or
and their
climate
use of it
change.
against us. Climate change. Jim, we have to leave it at that. Thank you for your time today, sir, and your extraordinary service to our country, which continues these days at the Geneva Center for Security Policy. God bless you. We'll come back to you soon. Next up, Elaine Donnelly will talk with us about the condition of our military and more right after this. Jim, that was